All right, we are at Kobolds and Catacombs. This is a very, very fan favorite expansion. It's arguably by a lot of people where Hearthstone really started to push the fucking gas for really powerful cards. And we'll get into some of them because they're not very good anymore. But this is like really the push. Had a bit of an off year in Year of the Raven, was a little bit weak, but then the next year, Year of the Dragon, again went on further and further to make show how they're going to push Hearthstone. So of course we're going to start with Druid as always. If you want to see some of the Druid cards, and then let's get into it. Starting off with Greedy Sprite. It's a 3 mana 3/1 Death Rattle, gain an empty mana crystal. Compare this to Splish Splash Whelp, and you understand why this card I think should be buffed in some way. I think you just bing bong 2 mana. Splish Splash Whelp was a 2 mana 2/1 on release, but it's a battle cry and kind of a condition. Greedy Sprite is a death rattle, so it's a lot slower, and it can be, it can be have better stats than Splish Splash Whelp because of the fact that unless your opponent trades it off, it's still worse. I think that this is an unfortunate card design because of the fact that something like Splish Splash Whelp exists, and I think that technically a way that you could make it better is to make it 1 mana. However, that's really dangerous. But what if we did something like this? 1 mana, 1, 3. So it's actually quite hard to break the new Greedy Sprite. Usually the 1/3 stat line is an upside, right? But when you're trying to kill off the minion as a death rattle, this is like a way to keep it down, keep it slower. Now, is this strong? Yes. Would you run this in a lot of decks? Probably. You probably would. But if you want Greedy Sprite to be in line with Splish Splash Whelp, it has to be a 1 mana minion, I think, because it's Death Rattle based. And I just like Greedy Sprite. I don't know. I kind of like the nature of the card. It's just I don't know. It's just an interesting card in my opinion. Like I liked playing this in what's it called? Spiteful Summoner Druid, because it was the only way you could ramp, because it was minion based ramp, not spell based, and it was the best one by far in standard, and it was really cool. So I'm like, okay, well, what if we just make it so it's 1 mana or 2 mana cheaper, but it has reverse its stats, so it's harder to get off. I think this would be fine. I don't see an issue with this. I'm not gonna lie. Okay, and then the next card I want to talk about is Astral Tiger. This card's fucking terrible. Like, it's actually terrible. But I was thinking, what if there was a way to make it better? Death Battle, shuffle a copy of this minion into your deck. Whenever you play a spell that... Wait. I guess it would be after. After you play a card that costs 5 or more, summon this. Would that make sense? Let's see. It would probably need to... Here, how would you word this? Shuffle a copy of this minion into your deck. I guess it would be, and after you play a card that costs 5 or more, summon this from your deck. The wording is really hard, I'm not gonna lie, but you understand what I'm talking about, right? It's gonna be like, after you play your first Astral Tiger, it's just a fucking vanilla 4 mana 3/5 beast, right? Then after you play it, after it dies once, it'll shuffle back in your deck, and the next time, here, I guess. And the next time you play a card that costs 5 or more, summon this from your deck. Okay. That wording was hard to make work, especially because Hearthstone cards don't really have this many lines. Yeah, I don't know. I think that this is interesting. It makes Astral Tiger kind of fit thematically with a more slower Druid. If you were to put this in standard, especially, it'd probably be a playable card because you're going to get, a 3/5 every time you play a card that costs 5 or more. So it kinda provides some value. In Wild, you wouldn't really play this because, playing a vanilla 4 mana 3/5 that then gives you a kind of decent upside isn't that great. But in Standard, I think this card would definitely see play if it went to, like, the core set or something like this. And that's kind of where I think a card like Astral Tiger should be. It's just a pretty decent value option in Standard. It's nothing crazy. You can use it in like a ramp Druid, and it's not terrible there. I think that's the perfect place for a card like Astral Tiger. Okay, for Hunter, there are so many cards that can be changed. Rockdalar, Crushing Walls, To My Side, Katharina, Flanking Strike, Spellstone, even Seeping Ooze are all interesting. I like to usually do 2-3. I'm at like 2 to 3 cards. I think Hunter I'm definitely going to do 3, but I'm not really sure which ones I want to do. I think Katharina is just not a card that can really be buffed to relevancy in Wild. If you made it like 6 mana, it probably wouldn't even be that great. It'd probably be better, but not that great. At 5 mana, it would probably be too strong, in my opinion. So it's kind of like a weird balance. So I think I'm going to do Rockdalar Flanking Strike for sure, and then we'll go from there. So for Flanking Strike, the first thing is obviously it's 3 mana. Like, that's such an easy change. Oh, you make it 3 mana, and then it's, wow, boom. It's actually kind of decent, right? But I was thinking, what if the Wolf had Rush? Would that be too good? Probably. It probably would be too good. I'm not going to lie. So I'm not too sure. Maybe deal 3 damage to a minion. If it or summon, summon a 3/3 Wolf. Deal, and after, wait. If the minion dies, give the Wolf Rush. Maybe like that, right? I like this effect. It makes Flanking Strike a lot better because even just as a 3 mana card, I don't think Flanking Strike sees play. And Flanking Strike is a very, very, very popular card. People loved this card when it was in the game. It was super strong at 4 mana, like back then. But nowadays, for Wild, it would probably be too... It wouldn't see play at 3, and I don't even think it would be that good in Standard at 3. I'm going to be honest with you. It probably would. It probably would be really good, actually. But fuck it, man. I don't care. This is mainly for Wild, like if it was a twist set. Some of the cards I do think about, like, what if they were to go to core, like Astral Tiger, but I'm not thinking of that for this Flanking Strike. So I have proposed changes to Rockdalar a million times over in the past. I think one of the first things you have to do is something like 4 mana. And then if your deck has no minions, it's already a pretty hard thing. So I think at 4 mana, it can have a different, like a slightly different condition. Or you make it 3 mana with no changes. And I kind of think the 3 mana with no changes is a little too uninteresting, especially for this series where sometimes I do like to change effects, just to make them more interesting. I think fill your hand with Hunter spells that cost 5 or less. You might be saying, oh, is that not worse to make them cost 5 or less? And no, it's better. Hunter spells that cost more than 5 are pretty terrible. So limiting them is useful. If anything, you kind of want it to be like 3 or less, in my opinion. Because again, Hunter spells that cost 4 and 5 aren't that good. The really good Hunter spells cost 3 or less, in my opinion. You're more likely to get secrets this way, which also dilutes the pool. So it is diluting the pool, don't get me wrong. But there are much better 1, 2, 3, and I guess 0 mana Hunter spells. So I think putting it like this definitely is a lot better. Your deck having no minions is still terrible, so let's go do that. I think it's obvious. If your deck has no minions, you can summon all 3. Or all 3. If your deck has no minions. Summon an Animal Companion, or all 3 if your deck has no minions. I mean, like, come on. There's no reason that it can't be like this. Your deck having no minions is a huge, huge, huge downside. So, like, especially for Hunter, which doesn't have no minion cards like Mage. These are the only 2 no minion cards in Hunter. So, you understand where I'm coming from, right? It wouldn't be too big of a deal to make To My Side summon all 3. Especially when you have something like Patrick Pals, which lets you technically do that for 8 mana, or, what's it called? Call of the Wild, which lets you do it for 8 as well. This is just the difference, right? It has a condition. It can be cheaper to do the same thing. I don't think this is an issue at all. I think this would be how the card should be. Dragon's Fury. Wow, okay. So Dragon's Fury used to be a really good card because you would always pull, like, really powerful spells, right? That cost like 6, 7, 10, and it would be good. I think the first thing you do is reveal another spell from your deck, deal damage equal to its cost to all minions. I think that would be already a big buff to like a big spell mage. But I think that you can make this card cost 4 mana. No, you couldn't, actually, now that I think about it. I think the breakpoint between 4 and 5 mana is where this card really has an issue, because 4 mana dealing like 8 to the board is probably too strong. At 5 mana, that's a big breakpoint because of aggro decks being able to kill you on turn 5 on average. So I think that Dragon's Fury, you know, being at that breakpoint is probably where it should be. Putting another means that you can't pull the other Dragon's Fury in your deck, which is really good, or really necessary, because that is a low roll. To, 5 mana deal 5 to the board is a low roll. And you kind of maybe reveal a spell from your deck that costs more. From your deck that costs 5, or here, would it be 6 or more? Deal damage to its cost to all minions. This is a little less of an elegant change, but it allows you to run Ice Block, which is pretty necessary for Mage. You can't really play any Mage deck without Ice Block in it, and it kind of still fits the idea of, okay, you won't be able to pull the other Dragon's Fury. It probably should be 5, and you could make it say another. Reveal another spell from your deck that costs 5 or more, deal damage equal to its cost to all minions. This is probably the best the card can be, and I think that this is where the card should be. I like this a lot. I think that this is where it probably should be. Then you have Deck of Wonders. Oh, man. Oh, oh man. Okay. Maybe 1 mana Deck of Wonders would not be balanced. Maybe, okay? But I think it's funny, and I don't care. It should probably be like 2 or 3 mana. And then I think you should probably increase the shuffle to maybe like 7, right? So it's at 10, like how the old one was 5 mana for 5 cards. That's 10 total. 3 mana for 7 scrolls is 10 total. I think that fits. I just think that buffing Deck of Wonders is it's whimsical. It's funny. Like, Deck of Wonders is a hilarious card. I think that we should do something like this just because it's funny. It's not going to be a good card even at 3 mana. It probably wouldn't. It probably would be too strong at 1 mana, actually. Like, the high roll potential would be really disgusting, don't get me wrong. But at 3 mana, it's just slow enough that, like, you're not going to be able to, like, play it on 1 and pass and just not have to deal with, like, an enemy board or something. At 3, that's at the point where, okay, you do have to deal with an enemy board, so if you play this, you're probably not happy. But I just think it's really funny, and I don't think anyone's going to be upset about Deck of Wonders. Okay. Then the one I want to talk about is Shifting Scroll. I've changed Molten Blade, I've changed Xeris. I think that Shifting Scroll could be a random Mage spell with a different spell school. I think this is interesting, actually. It makes it so that when you're playing, your spell school Mage and Wild, you can have Shifting Scroll as maybe a one of, and then sometimes you'll get a spell school that you just don't have, or just maybe a random spell with a different spell school. So our Shifting Scroll is an arcane spell, so it'll change to a different one, and then a different one, and then a different one, right? I don't think it needs to be limited to Mage when you have something like, I don't know what it's called. It's the 2 mana shadow spell that lets you discover like a spell from any class. And then you have like the 2 mana 1/3 lets you discover a spell from any class, costs 1 less. I think that Shifting Scroll could be something like that. Each turn this in your hand, transform into a random spell with a different spell school. It doesn't have to be a Mage spell. That's it. Then, for Paladin, it was obviously going to be Valimir. I mean, like, come on. This is, like, one of the coolest weapons ever. I think that you just bump the cost down and you bump the stats down a tiny bit. Wow. 4 mana, 3/2 Valimir. Wow. I don't think this is anything crazy. I don't think anyone would object to this. I think you could maybe even make it a 4/2, but I think just to be a little safe, keeping it as the 3/2, because it technically is an infinite weapon. You don't want to always have like a 4 damage every single turn. That probably adds up too much. Because after like 2 re-equips, it's really good. Like the mana value you spent on it. I think at 4 mana, like 3/2, it's definitely fine. Like, I think this would be cool. I think that you would have use cases to run this. You would maybe actually run this in like a Reno Paladin because it just gives you so much damage. And of course, hand buffing, for your minions, push a lot. I think this would be completely fine. And then you have Crystal Lion, 6 mana, 5/5, Divine Shield, cost 1 less for each civilian hand recruit you control. I think it's just you've summoned this game. Wow. This is a change people have wanted forever since Crystal Lion came out, actually. It's still even costed, so you can't really run it in Odd Paladin, but like, would that matter? Would this be too good in Odd Paladin? I don't think so. Odd Paladin is struggling significantly. I think at 5 mana, it might be. It might be a little bit too strong, in my opinion. But at 7 mana, it's fine. There's like nothing crazy about it. You can get this discounted by like turn 4, and that's fine. It's just a pretty nice beefy minion. It's nothing crazy. It just gives Odd Paladin a slight buff. I do think though at 5 playing this on turn 3 like guaranteed would be a little too good because you just tap on 2 or use button on 2, button on 3, and then this costs 1. That's why I don't think that's a good idea. But I think it's fine. You could technically still play it on turn 3 if you have Tour Guide, if you have Into the Jungle, I think that's what it's called, where they both are going to let you summon 2 guys on 1, but that requires, more cards, it requires more setup, it requires more mana being spent. I think this is completely fine. And it would just be interesting. I'm not going to lie, Odd Paladin has been bad for a while, and it's one of my favorite Odd decks, for sure. Okay. Dragon Soul. I think that there's a lot of things you need to do with this card. First, I think at 3 mana, it's probably too weak. I think you can make this 2 mana. And then I think you could make it, after you cast 3 spells, summon a 5/5 dragon. Would this be too good? Maybe. Maybe you do 3 and then you increase the stats of the dragon. Maybe after you cast 3 spells, summon a 6/6 dragon. I think this would be cool. I think that it's fun. Dragon Soul was actually experimented with Zarimi in like a Miracle Priest deck. It just wasn't very good because, Dragon Soul sucks. But this would let you run it in, I don't know, like another spell-based deck, and then when you get it down, you can just play 3 spells. Sometimes you'll just bank like 2 spells, right? Or you'll bank 1 spell when you play it. And then you can get the 6/6 dragon the next time and the next time. And it's just really funny. I think that this is where the card probably should have been. It's just after you cast 3 and not after you cast 3 in a turn. In a turn is bad. It just makes the card so terrible. So I think putting it like this definitely makes it a little better. I miss Control Dragon Priest. I'm going to say it. I miss Control Dragon Priest. Bink. Bonk. Wow. Wow. I don't know. I mean, Control Dragon Priest was really cool. It was beloved by the community for a long time. I think Twilight Acolyte going to this kind of mana cost helps a lot. You nerf the attack, which is actually still a buff to the card because of the effect. You swap its attack, so now instead of giving something 2 attack, you give it 1 attack, which I don't think has any negative consequences. I don't think there are any cards that specifically need something to be 2 attack. You would run it with the Mind Control card. I forget what it's called. It was like the 4 mana one that would take something that had 2 or less. And that's what the good combo was, right? But I think this is fine. I mean, Twilight Acolyte hasn't been playable in a long time. I think Control Dragon Priest can get some buffs, and this would be a good one for it. And then, of course, Duskbreaker. I think the first thing you do for Duskbreaker is to all non-dragon minions. It's probably going to be like that. And then I think you just buff the stats. Like, why can't it be a 4 mana 4/4? Right? It's already a great removal card, but why can't it still not? Why does it have to kill your board? And why does it have to be understated into current year? It's still understated, being a 4/4 instead of a 4/5, but in current year, this is fine. This lets you actually build a board of dragons to have your control board, because control decks have to be tempo nowadays. They have to have some form of tempo. They can't just do nothing and clear cards. So not clearing your own board, having a better body helps a lot. And I love Control Dragon Priest. I don't care if I'm being biased. I want it to be good again. That's just what I'm going to say. I don't know. I don't think buffing the effect to deal 4 damage is fair. I think that would be a little too gross, and it kind of defeats the purpose of the card. So, yeah. Dorai Strider. This card, I think, was buffed when it came to core, but it still sucks. I think you just do. With Rush. Wow. It's now a lot better. Wow. This card was really good for a long time because it just gave you so many stats, right? But again, in today's game, a card like this doesn't really do anything. It doesn't fight for board because the spiders don't have any immediate effect. And that's kind of the thing, is a lot of cards need to fight for board when they're something like this. So it's still a 4-mana 4/4 that's pretty mediocre, but the spiders that come out of it now have Rush, and that's better. That's just so much better. I think this would be where the card should be now, of course. I think if you really want the card to be good, you make it like a 3-mana 4/3, but I don't like that. I think that it being a 4-mana 4/4 that summons 3 4/4s, so it's 4 4/4s total. 4 4 4 4 4 4 4 4 4. I'm fucking Jin from League of Legends. But yeah, and then giving them Rush makes it actually so they can fight for the board. I think that's where the card probably makes the most sense. I mean, Feldori Strider is again an iconic card. Like, a lot of cards from this era were just so powerful and so iconic that it makes sense. Another iconic card from this era is Elven Minstrel. Why does it still have to be a combo card? Wow. Battlecry, draw 2 minions from your deck. Wow. I mean, this doesn't even make the card playable, in my opinion. I think doing something like this helps a lot, but I don't even think this makes the card playable to be Battlecry. I think it still is pretty mediocre, but at least it helps a lot. It being a combo makes no sense in current year. Combo cards that are really expensive aren't good anymore. There's like combo cards cost 1 mana. Have you ever seen a combo card get played in Wild that costs more than like 2 mana? I can't think of any in the last like few years. It's like Swindle and then 1 mana combo cards. So yeah. Like Elven Minstrel, I guess technically Scabs, but Scabs also technically cost 0, so there's that. But yeah, I mean, Elven Minstrel doing Battlecry, draw 2 cards. This would make it so you could play this in things like a shark kind of rogue, pirate rogue with Hook Tusk, so you can draw through your deck a little better. Because it's a Battlecry, you can double it up. Yeah, I think this is probably better for the card. Oh, Windshear Stormcaller. Bink. Bonk. Bink. Oh my god. Wait. Oh, that was my fucking intro. Oh, that's so funny. Or my outro. Okay, sorry about that. I have the video in another tab, and I actually unpaused it with my keyboard. But whatever. Windshear Stormcaller, 4 mana, 4/4. You knock it down by 1 mana, 1/1. And then now you can run it in Even Shaman, and that's really funny. Would you run it in Even Shaman? Probably not. Probably not. But you can do it, so that's why it's funny. You never had any reason to run this card before, but now that it's 4 mana, you can maybe run it with like, what is it called? Totemic Evidence? Whatever, the 1 mana card that summons all 4 basic totems. Now you can do that for 5 mana. That's not the worst thing ever. It's not great, obviously, because Alkir isn't even that great, but it's just really funny. Some of these cards are just funny buffs. Like, I don't think anyone's going to complain about a funny card getting buffed. Like fucking Windshear Stormcaller. I just think it's funny, and I want it to be possible to run an Even Shaman, because that's funny. Okay. Hear me out on this. There is a Shaman card, I think it's like deal 8 damage to a minion and excavate for 3 mana, I think. Right? Crushing Hand, obviously deal 8 damage to a minion, overload for 3. What if... Hear me out. Overloading for more than like 3 or 4 doesn't actually matter. It doesn't. Overloading for 1 or 2 does hurt a lot, don't get me wrong. But once you get into higher overload amounts, it actually just doesn't matter at all. Right? Because you're probably going to lose your turn anyway. So, what if you made it so it still is going to deal, 8 damage to a minion, overload 8, or for 2 mana. But then, because it's such a high overload, now it synergizes better with overload cards like Overdraft or God, what's the card called? It's the 3-mana 3/4. It's like Therum. I don't know. It's from Titans where it draws cards based on your overload. What if you did it like that? You know, that's not amazing. Drawing 8 cards is a downside a lot of the time. You're gonna burn some cards, but like your Overdraft would deal 8 damage. That's funny. That's just funny. It would take a lot of setup for that to really matter. Don't get me wrong. You need minions, then you need Overdraft, you need 2 Crushing Hands to deal 16, or you need like the quest to get it to do that point. But like, so this is on paper a nerf. Don't get me wrong, but I think it's a buff to like an Overload Shaman, where you get a huge amount of overload, and then you can use the quest. You can refresh it with Pebbly Page, or with Lava Shock, or with whatever the 2-mana card is in Old Gods, or with Overdraft. I think I already said that. Or with the quest itself, the quest line's first stage itself. I think that I think this is just more interesting. I'm going to be honest with you. More interesting than Overload 3. It actually, has a niche, a use case at Overload 8. And I think that's where cards like this should be, right? It's a really powerful card to play early, and the Overload 3, yeah, it locks you out of your turn 3. So does Overload 8 would lock you out of your turn 3, but so does Overload 3 anyway, right? So the amount of overload doesn't matter. I don't know. I like it. I think that giving more use to bad cards is better than just straight buffing them. A lot of the time. Alright, first things first, Possessed Lackey, I mean, you just... Wow! It's the same as it was when it came out now! It's been nerfed for fucking forever. It's been 6 mana for so long that a lot of people probably don't even know that it's 5 mana. It's been 6 mana longer than it was 5 mana, actually. Because it came out in 2017? So it's been 6 mana for longer than it's been 5 mana. That's crazy. I mean, yeah, it was 5 mana on release. I think this is a simple change. You just buff it like this. Come on, man. For those of you that don't know what the first seal is, it is from Rin. This is what her death rattle is. It gives you the first seal, and then the second seal, all the way up until you can get to Azari, which will destroy your opponent's deck. I know. In the past, you would only be able to play these like twice a turn. Now you could play them all for 10 mana because there's 5 of them, if I think correctly. And then you could play Azari. So you'd have to play a bad 6-drop, then spend your 10 mana playing 5 of these. It's 2/2, 3/3, 4/4, 5/5, and I think a 6/6. And then you get Azari, which is another 10 mana card to then destroy your opponent's deck. So it's 26 mana in total. I don't think that's at all an issue, like, whatsoever. I mean, like, come on, dude. It's not like Rin is a good card. Yeah, getting your deck destroyed sucks, but it takes 26 mana, dude. If you're complaining about a 26 fucking mana, like, spent to lose a shitload of tempo and only destroy your deck instead of just killing you, I don't know what the fuck to say. People complain about the worst shit in this game, and it's so stupid. Like, we can buff Rin, dude. It's a legendary from an old set that has been bad for forever. I don't see any reason why this is an issue. Okay. For people who do not know, Kobold Barbarian was theorized to be, okay, you play it on 3, it attacks at the start of your turn, and then you get your attack, right? When the card came out, it did not do that. And people were upset, because that's what they thought would happen, right? Then, I think it was last year, it was changed to actually do that. If Kobold Barbarian had come out with that effect, this would have been one of the best cards of all time, in my opinion. It would have seen play in Pirate Warrior all the way up until Descent of Dragons, which is a huge fucking boon for the deck. This would have made Pirate Warrior even better than it was, and Pirate Warrior was pretty good during that time, like that time stretch of, what is it called? Gadget Sand 2 Descent of Dragons. That version of Pirate Warrior was pretty good, for different metas, right? And Kobold Barbarian would have gone in that deck because, I mean, look at it, right? With that effect. So I think that that's really fucking unfortunate. And I think that it's sad. I think it's so sad that it never got to do that. Even if it was a 4-3 and it still had that, it would have been so nice. So, you know what? Fuck it, we ball, man. Fuck it, we ball. Fuck it, we goddamn ball. Fuck it, we goddamn ball. 2-mana Cobalt Library! Okay, Woe Cleaver. I think first of all, you bump the mana cost down by a lot. After your attacks, recruit a minion. I think that you could just say that costs, I don't know, maybe 4 or more. Oops. Doing it this way, instead of 5 or more, means you can't run as many small minions. But I think that this makes it so you just could run a few small minions, right? Obviously, you know, the whole idea of big decks is that you only are running big minions, but that doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Like, these decks are so terrible and wild because they can't run cheap minions. It's the main reason. Other decks get to do the exact same thing they do, but with giants on, like, turn 3. And then their downside is they just can't run any minions whatsoever. All these big decks. Like, how is that a fair trade-off? That shit like Rogue or Warlock or technically Paladin can play giants on turn 2 or 3. Multiple giants even. But like big decks like Paladin again, Hunter, Warrior, Priest, Rogue sometimes can't run small minions in their deck because of, you know, restrictions. Or, you know, they're not being restrictions, actually, is what I should say. So it's just being a blanket play, like, summon a thing. I think that, like, you have to have, like, this kind of restriction to the cards to make them playable. I don't know, man. It's just unfortunate game design, in my opinion. Okay, I mean, let's be real here for a second. For any single person that has ever watched a single one of my videos, they know that I think that 1-drops unilaterally are weaker than they should be for every class except like 3 or 4. And I like buffing minions that could just be 1 mana. Wow. Cobalt Apprentice. Wow. 1 mana, Battlecry, deal 3 damage, randomly spelling amongst all enemies. Wow. Compare this shit to, like, Fillet Fighter, which is a 3-1. I nerfed the stats on Cobalt Apprentice, don't get me wrong. Fillet Fighter, it's a 3-1 that does 1 damage. Or to fucking Shadow Bomber, which is a 3-1 that deals 3 damage face. Yeah. Yeah. Cobalt Apprentice. Yeah. Grand Archivist. I think this card, first of all, could be 7 mana. And then I think you say, at the end of your turn, cast the highest cost spell from your deck. Targets chosen randomly. I think that this is where if a card like this were to be printed today, it would probably be at this power level. This helps a lot of big spell decks like Mage, where you can maybe get like Pocket Galaxy from your deck. Or, you know, an Iceblood Garrison, I think is what it's called. That's probably the Warrior one. Whatever the 10 mana Mage spell that does this effect, so you can cheat it out, I think that would be nice to be able to cheat something like that from your deck. This helps Mage a lot, actually, mainly. It just helps Mage a lot. A lot of big spells in Mage. This also is pretty useful in Hunter. You could get your Call of the Wild. You could get your Grand Slam. A lot of decks just would like a card like this, just straight up. A lot of classes. And I think that, why couldn't it? Why couldn't it be like this? It also means you can run lighter spells, like cheaper spells, and not be at fear. That's the thing about a lot of these cards, is a lot of cards like this that I'm always going to change. I think that cards like this should have a specific thing that it's going to hit, rather than being fully random, or they're just unplayable. Because not running minions is bad. Not running spells is bad. You need to have a good mix of all these things in your deck, or you need to have super powerful payoff cards, like Mage does now currently. The Mage payoff cards are actually good enough now. So now you actually can play it. So I think Grand Archivist fits that perfectly. Also, this was so obvious going to be Master Oakheart. I think you just... Wow. It was so obviously going to be Master Oakheart, man. Like, come on. This is such a fucking iconic legendary from the era. It was so popular in, like, Taunt Druid, especially. Actually, I think it was only Taunt Druid that really played this card. But Taunt Druid is just so slow nowadays. There's no reason to play it. So buffing Master Oakheart to something like 7 mana, would that really do much for the deck? Probably not. I'm going to be honest with you. But It lets you summon Hadronox, it lets you summon Dragon Caller or Dragon Hatcher, whatever the fuck it's called, the 9-mana minion that's also from this set. It's just so nice. Taunt Druid has been unplayable for years, and it's a fan favorite deck. I don't see an issue with bringing it back, because it would still get rolled over by aggro and combo, like, at the same time, but it would beat other slow decks pretty significantly. And I think that Ramp Druid that does stuff like that is where we should be pushing Druid. I think that Ramp Druid that just kills you on turn, like, 7 is not cool, but Ramp Druid that summons Master O card on turn 7, that's really cool. So, yeah. Anyway, that's going to be it from me. If you enjoyed, make sure to like, comment, subscribe. Tell me what you think down below. Did I miss any cards that you wanted to be buffed? Did I buff some cards you don't like? Do you like any of the changes that I proposed? And I'll see you guys next time. Peace.
Rising again!
Darker than they've ever been.